Everyone. My name is Tyler Striegel, and I have chosen for my author study the author Anne Isaacs. And it's actually sort of a backwards story of how I chose Anne Isaacs. Um, as part of the Wiki Reader's Log, I had chosen a number of books, and one of them that I happened to choose was Swamp Angel by Anne Isaacs, which I have here. And it was a Caldecott Honor book, not a Caldecott Award winner, but a Caldecott Honor. So I read the book, of course, for the wiki, and when I read it, I didn't care for it that much. It just didn't do really anything for me. It was interesting, and I guess there was some moral there, but educationally, I guess perhaps it could be used to introduce different dialects or something. It has a little bit of a southern dialogue to it. Anyways, what struck me as odd was that if it wasn't a Caldecott Honor book, I would have never given it a second thought. I would have thought, this is a children's book and it's kind of boring and it doesn't have a lot of educational value. So I picked up, before I had even chosen to do the author study on Anne Isaacs, I sort of had it in the back of my mind, but I chose to pick up Dust Devil, which is this book here. I have the other books, but I don't have a lot of space here. Dust Devil, which is sort of I believe, it is it is like a continuation of the story of Swamp Angel. Swamp Angel is about Angelica Longrider, who is essentially a giant girl. When she was born, she was already larger than her mother, which anatomically is confusing, but it's a children's book, obviously. And it's sort of a continuation of the story, and it hasn't won any Caldecott Awards or anything. And of course, Caldecott Award doesn't mean that the book itself is that the story itself is necessarily all that great, but it can be that the illustrations are pretty amazing. And I will admit that the illustrations, while are good, I don't care for them again. But Swamp Angel was actually published in January of the year 2000, and here, Dust Devil, and I'll zoom in so you can sort of see the book and the poster that I've made here. Dust Devil did not come out until 10 years afterwards, which I thought was interesting. There's a number of books that she wrote in between that. But Anne Isaacs, as an author, first she was born in Buffalo, New York, actually in 1949, which was surprising to me. That was, and I don't mean this offensively at all, but it was longer ago than I would have imagined, based on the books. And because she was born in Buffalo, if you're aware, Buffalo is typically very cold, especially in winter, so she spent much of her time inside. And because of this, she was a typically shy child, and she believed that she was often, and this is her words, lost in a world of her imagination. So she was always sort of in her own mind. She was always sort of coming up with ideas and stories and poems, and she said that poetry has probably affected her more than any other genre, and even at a young age she enjoyed writing poetry. And being a shy child, she tended to bury herself in books. Interestingly enough, she says that a turning point in her life was in 4th grade, and her words are, she was changed forever by her first readings of Shakespeare and Coleridge. She was spellbound by their emotional directness, interweaving of thought and feeling, and above all, the pure music of their words. And I thought that was an interesting idea, that this children's author believed that Shakespeare and Coleridge were huge influences on her, because I mean, I'm not like an expert on Shakespeare or anything, but I don't see a ton of connection there. Eventually, she was given the book Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and she claims to this day that she's read that more than any other book, especially in her childhood. And again, that's another book that had a huge impact on her life, and she actually accredits her career combination of being an educator, a mother, and an author, in part due to the effect of Little Women. Again, she had always enjoyed writing, even at a young age. She enjoyed writing poetry and stories, but she didn't take it seriously until she was older and had children of her own, which is something that I didn't expect. Again, I guess I've never really studied children's authors before. I mean, I've learned a little bit about them, but I've never studied one in particular. And part of the reason that she writes children's literature as she does now is that she sort of, as she says, she learned the literature backwards, or she was exposed to literature backwards. She first began as a child, she would read adult literature. And then as she grew older, that's when she was first exposed to children's literature. It was, as she says, and these are her words, I mainly read adult literature as a child, but as an adult I began to read children's literature, often encountering a classic work for the first time while reading it to my children. So much of the books that I assume are sort of children's literature classics, I am quick to think of The Very Hungry Caterpillar. That's one that I was surprised in this course to learn just how old it was, because that was something that was popular when I was a child, and this was, 15 years ago. But the book is much older than that, and that's something that, based on this, that she probably hadn't been exposed to until she had read it to her children. So after reading these books to her children, she started really getting interested in writing children's books, and since that time, she has had 8 books published, beginning with her first published work, Cat Up a Tree, which was published in 1998, and continuing to her newest book, Meanwhile Back at the Ranch, which is actually set to release in February 2014 and has not come out yet, which was a little tricky on her website when I was researching her. It doesn't say that it hasn't come out yet. It just shows it as one of her works. So I was searching, and finally I found on Amazon that I could buy the book, but then when I went through the process, a few steps in, it tells me it's a pre-order and that the book isn't released until February of 2014. So I wasn't able to pick up that book, obviously, because it's not out yet. As far as illustrators go, she has worked with many of them: Lloyd Bloom, Stephen Mackey, Mark T, Dan Sante, but most notably probably was Paul O. Zielinski, whom did the illustrations for Swamp Angel, which is probably her most well-known book, and it is a Caldecott Honor book, and Dust Devil, which is again the sort of continuation of Swamp Angel and the story of Angelica Longrider. If I just bring this in here, you can see Dust Devil. Take a moment. You see Anne Isaacs there, and that is actually a picture of her. Then around there we have pictures of her works: Treehouse Tales, Dust Devil, The Ghosts of Luckless Gulch, Cat Up a Tree, which is her first work, Pancakes for Supper, Swamp Angel, of course. And then again, there is the actual Swamp Angel book. Yeah, so that is sort of the story of Anne Isaacs, and those are her works, her published works. Thank you.